I'm Dale Smith for Looney Politics, and after a teacher in Chelsea, Quebec was removed from her job for wearing a hijab, there have been all kinds of demands for the Prime Minister to step in and do something about the situation. The problem is that he really doesn't have a lot he can actually do in this situation. This is a provincial law, and the federal government is not an overriding jurisdiction. It's a division of powers, not a delegation of powers to the provinces, and therefore he really doesn't have any levers at his disposal. There have been people who are saying, well, what about disallowance? The problem is that disallowance powers are now a constitutional dead letter and would not really be an available tool, not to mention the fact that disallowance powers needed to be used within 1 year of passage of a provincial law. And it's now been 2 since the law in question has been in operation. The other problem is that there aren't a lot of avenues for the federal government to go at this in the courts. Now, aside from the fact that the provincial government preemptively used the notwithstanding clause in order to insulate itself from court challenges, and there's already been one so far where the judge said that this basically was the saving feature for this bill, otherwise it would have been struck down. It's just that there's not a federal legal right in dispute here that the federal government could then take to court. Federal governments are not really equipped or have the capacity to go to court every time there's a provincial law that they disagree with. Now, if it does come to the Supreme Court at some point, they can file to be an intervener and make legal arguments at that point, but there's no real role for them to be in the lower courts, and that's part of the situation here. Now, we are seeing mayors from around the country raising money in order to help fund those court challenges because they want to be able to try and do something for the situation, but the federal government really doesn't have that ability. There is a dedicated fund for constitutional court challenges, which is arm's length from the federal government. So people who are launching these, if they make it as far as the Supreme Court, could apply for these funds, but the federal government has no say over who gets them. The other aspect at play here is that the Prime Minister is basically keeping his powder dry in order to stop this from becoming a federal-provincial wedge. The provincial government would be more than happy to have the federal government step in so that they can claim a federal overreach and make all kinds of nationalist arguments in the Quebec legislature. But the Prime Minister, by not directly intervening, is keeping the provincial government from doing that. That also helps the civil society groups in Quebec who are opposing this legislation from having that particular fight being imposed upon them. At this point, the Prime Minister is using his moral authority, such as it is, in order to denounce the legislation, but that's pretty much all he can do really at this point. Other party leaders are making similar-ish stands, but probably not quite as forcefully for various reasons of their own, some of it which has to do with trying to stay out of provincial jurisdiction so much as they are attempting to. This doesn't leave much in the way of options for the federal government to intervene. It's largely a political problem that needs to be solved by the people of Quebec on a political level. For Looney Politics, I'm Dale Smith.